Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the second episode from Let's Talk About Insulin series. And today, my guest is Craig Stubing, who is a founder and CEO of Beta Cell Foundation, and he's running a Beta Cell podcast. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 13 years old, and he's been involved in many diabetes projects such as T1 Disney, Type 1 Run, and more. And today we will be talking about insulin in United States. And for me, as a person living in Europe, it's interesting, it's important to learn more about how life with diabetes looks like beyond Europe. And I think it's very important discussion. So let's invite Craig to the studio. Hello, Craig.
Hey there. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for accepting the invitation. And first, I would like to ask you how the Beta Cell Foundation started and what are the current activities?
So the Beta Cell Foundation started right at the beginning of 2020. One of the things that's been most impactful for me having type 1 is having like a local community, having friends nearby, that I can go on hikes with or biking with, or even just to meet up, to hang out. And I've realized that a lot of people don't have that same community. And we wanted to find ways to kind of help foster those relationships. Over the last, crazy 2 years, we haven't really been able to meet in person. So we've been kind of trying to find new ways to help people get in touch. One of those ways is a event calendar that anyone in the world can submit their online or in-person event to just get more eyes on it. Let people know that's going on, so they don't just have to be on Instagram at the right time of day to see the event. And then we're also working on 3 different phone apps that we've just started to kind of help education and community. One of them is kind of a social network that will have people in little pods within their area. And then one focused on wellness, mental wellness with type 1 diabetes. I'm sure you know, and everyone listening knows, is a huge issue that doesn't get talked about enough. And then the last one's kind of just actual diabetes management through kind of like a video game simulator, almost, to kind of teach people what diabetes is like without having to like try it on themselves first.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it should be fun.
And what about Beta Cell podcast? You're running the podcast, and so what people can currently listen to?
Yeah, so podcast has been around for almost 6 years now. It's grown a lot over that time. There's now 5 different shows that all kind of have a unique style. The original show, Beta Cell, focuses on interviews with people with type 1 diabetes, kind of very similar to what we're doing right now. The latest episode I've done on that was a long episode on kind of insulin in the United States. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today with you, people can hear even more in depth on that episode. They go to betacellpodcast.com or even brokenvials.com. It'll take you straight to that episode. And then our other shows are a talk show where we talk about issues with type 1 diabetes, a show where I actually follow my aunt who was diagnosed with type 1 when she was 60 years old. So that was about 2 years ago. And so we check in periodically and see what it's like for someone diagnosed so late in life to kind of transition to diabetes. And it's really eye-opening to me because I think as a kid, I kind of missed a lot of that stuff because I was just busy being a kid. And then our last show actually has people with type 1 interviewing people close to them in their lives about how diabetes has affected them. So a spouse or a parent or a friend, because I think diabetes, as we all know, affects people outside of just us. Impacts everyone around us. And then all these shows kind of try to get a more well-rounded look at diabetes in our lives. It's not just a thing that happens when we eat, right? It impacts us all day, every day, and everyone around us in some way. And I think it helps. Hearing other people talk about this helps us deal with it more ourselves, and I think kind of shifts the conversation about what diabetes really is to hopefully change, policy and just attitudes towards diabetes worldwide.
I had a chance to to listen to a few episodes, and I remember the broken vials like really hit me. So
Yeah.
now we can move to the next topic that is connected, very much connected. It's I want to ask about the current situation with insulin in the United States.
Yeah, well, it's really bad. People think of the United States as being this, rich, developed country. All the, pharmaceutical makers are here coming up with new things. But the problem is that people can't afford it. 1 in 4 people, 25% of people who need insulin-dependent diabetes, can't afford it. So that means they're either rationing it, they're getting extra supplies from someone they don't know, or they're not taking it, and potentially facing long-term complications or even death. In the U.S., for total people with diabetes, all types of diabetes, it's about 7% of the world's diabetics are in the U.S. But the U.S. accounts for 39% of the cost of diabetes. That 7% is 39% of the cost of diabetes worldwide. So it's just an astounding, disparity. We're paying so much. And you would think that with that money, we would have the best care, but that's not necessarily the case. We're definitely more privileged in that, we can go to any pharmacy and it has insulin there in stock. It has test strips, you can get pumps, but the problem is that comes back to that cost. And there's a lot of factors that come into this. And maybe I'll start with kind of a big picture look at it. So when you read articles about kind of the supply line, I guess, of the whole industry, or you hear from different nonprofits who are trying to talk about this issue, they look at it from this very, very macro perspective. You have insulin makers, right? You have these all over the world. You have insurance companies, and then you have these pharmacy benefit managers in the middle, which are kind of a unique American thing. And what happens is the insurance companies that we pay for to get, insurance every month, they kind of subcontract out the making of their insurance plans, like all the drugs on it. It's called a formulary. They kind of subcontract this out to these pharmacy benefit managers, and the pharmacy benefit managers go to the insulin makers and they kind of have them bid on it like an auction to see who wants to be on this list. And whoever pays the most gets to be on the list. And as you, the patient, that's the only thing you have access to that your insurance will cover. So, maybe a good comparison would be, you're going to the grocery store and you want to buy milk, right? There's all these different types of milk, right? There's almond milk, there's oat milk, right? There's 2% milk, there's whole milk. So the grocery store maybe decides, we don't want to spend all this time figuring out what to put on the shelf. So we're going to hire someone else to go out there and do it for us. So this company would then go to all the different milk makers and say, who wants to pay the most money to be on the shelf? And if that's the oat milk guys, they're like, we're going to pay the most money, then that's all that shows up at the grocery store. You go in, that's the one item available to you in that grocery store. And if you want to buy something else, if you're allergic to oat milk, you can go and buy it, but it's going to be much higher price somewhere else. It's not going to be covered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it
Kind
makes
of.
more sense than
That may?
yeah, long articles, because it sounds, I mean, it is complicated. It sounds
Yeah.
complicated. So how the health insurance, works in the USA, for me and for many people from Europe, is hard to understand
And it's
why that
intentionally, right?
situation came to, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's designed to be complicated because then everyone who's a part of it can blame someone else. The people who make the oat milk can blame the grocery store for only putting their stuff on the shelf, but the grocery store can blame, the person in between for only picking the oat milk. And so because it's so complicated, it gives everyone this cover to kind of keep doing bad things, right? Because no one really knows what's going on. But the problem with this kind of macro perspective is that it doesn't really take into account the person with diabetes, right? Like, I don't know about you, but I'm not a pharmaceutical maker. I'm not a supply line. I'm not a warehouse. So knowing what those things are doesn't really affect me in my day-to-day life. What matters to me is how I get insulin so that I can stay alive. And so in the US, you can go and buy health insurance. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, and I don't want to confuse people even more. But if I want to, most people get insurance through their employer. That's kind of just the way it's been set up in the US since World War II, because there were freezes on salaries because of the war effort. And so companies had to come up with different ways to get employees. And so they came up with these benefits. And one of them was they'd pay for your health insurance. And that kind of stuck around. And now we're kind of stuck with getting your health insurance through your employer. If you don't do that, you can go out now and buy on the free market an insurance plan. A lot of you might have heard of Obamacare. That's what that is. I can go online and find all these different plans. If I make too little money, I can get government insurance. Or if I'm over 65, I can get government insurance. So there's all these weird gaps, right? There's all these different programs. So what I have to do, for example, as someone having commercial insurance through an employer, is I pay a premium, which is a certain amount of money every month just to have that plan, right? So that could be $300 a month. It could be $600 a month. It could be $800 a month. That's just to have the insurance. That doesn't really mean I get anything. It just means I have it. Then if I want to go buy insulin, right, I go to the pharmacy, and first of all, my insulin has to be covered, right? Like I said, if it's not covered, if I want Humalog and my insurance plan only covers Novolog, then I have to pay $300 for a vial of insulin, vial of Humalog. That's the price that it's sold for in the US. If it is covered, I might only pay $20 or $30, right? So it's a huge difference. And that's kind of all I see as a person with diabetes, right? I have to spend all of this money just for the chance to buy insulin. And even then, it's probably costing more over the counter than it does for you in Europe, right? You're probably not paying $40 a vial of insulin. So the system isn't really designed for patients. It's designed for businesses to kind of make the most amount of money. And I'm sure everyone in Europe's heard these statistics of $300 a vial of insulin. And it's true. That's what it costs. If I go to a pharmacy right now and I say, I want that vial, assuming I have a prescription, of course, because that's another unique thing in the US. We have to have a prescription. And it would be $300. if my insurance doesn't cover it. And there's a lot of different reasons why insurance wouldn't cover it. If I've gotten too much insulin, if I break a vial and I need an extra, I might have to pay for that out of pocket. If it's a brand I, want that they don't cover, and a lot of different factors. Yeah. I don't know if that
Sounds
makes any sense.
very scary.
It is.
Very scary.
And I think it impacts people in the US in ways that haven't really been studied. Living with diabetes in the US is living on some level, kind of a constant fear that you're going to run out of insulin, which for a drug that's been around 100 years and costs $6 a vial to make just seems absolutely insane. But people will do things like stay in a job that they don't want just because they have insurance, or they will marry someone just to get on their insurance plan, or if they're on government insurance because of their income, they won't get married because if they get married, their combined income will be so much they won't be able to stay on the government insurance. People ration their insulin, like we talked about. People share insulin with, who have good plans with people who don't have good plans, just so that they stay alive. But, on some level, there's always that fear that you might run out of insulin and not be able to get any more. I mean, even me sometimes when it gets towards the end of the month and I'm waiting for that refill, I think, I could run out. Maybe I should eat a little less food, just to make sure I'm not up to that last day. And it's a scary way to live. And it's kind of unfair. Yeah. People with diabetes, people with any disease don't really deserve that, for something as readily available as insulin that's been around as long as it is and costs so little to make. It's insane that so many people are afraid of running out of it, and so many people are dying or rationing their insulin because of it.
Yeah, that's so awful. It's really, it sounds awful, scary, and and for me it's like I can't even imagine this fear, because I've never been in such situation. So it shows how it's different, like all over the world, and some people will never experience this fear, and some people, as you said, what you are experiencing, and other people with diabetes, many people with diabetes in the United States. So I want to ask what we can do, people from Europe, from outside of the US, to help, to do something, because I mean, obviously we can't pack insulin and just send it to USA.
Yeah.
But maybe we can, do something else.
Yeah. I mean, when you send me this question, I was thinking a lot about like, what could you do besides just adopting us and we just move in with you, right? And we all move to Europe, right? And use your insulin. But it's really getting both governments and nonprofits to put pressure on insulin makers is really what it comes down to. I mean, 3 companies, Sanofi, Novo Nordisk, and Eli Lilly, control 90% of the insulin in the world. 90%. And almost 100% of the insulin in the US comes from these 3 companies. So, they control everything. They can set the prices whatever they want. Just for example, just with Humalog insulin, right? Everyone knows Humalog. Eli Lilly last year made $2.6 billion selling Humalog, and 55% of that money was just in the US. And remember, only 7% of people with diabetes in the world live in the US, but over half the money they made off of Humalog was in the US because the price is so high. And unless governments start putting pressure on these insulin makers, it's gonna, keep impacting people in the U.S. and people globally. I'm sure you're going to talk about this a lot in your upcoming interviews. 1 in 2 people in the world are rationing insulin, and it's those same 3 companies. You know, it's they kind of can do whatever they want, and part of it is governments not clamping down and stopping them. And then on the other hand, you have a lot of type 1 nonprofits that accept money from insulin makers that aren't putting pressure on them either. They're the ones who are kind of helping muddy the waters on who the real problem is here. And unless we have this combined force stopping the insulin makers, there's going to be no stopping them.
Yeah. So we just need to, I guess, raise our voices together and just keep on doing our advocacy work and support nonprofits who are fighting for access.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same bad people, right, in the world and in the US. And unless we are all on the same side, right, we can't have people out there with diabetes or claiming to represent people with diabetes saying that pharma is the good guy. If they're out there making them look good with whatever that is, whether that's putting up news articles about great things they've done or programs they have, or defending them in any way, that takes the pressure off of them. And if they look like the good guy at all, governments aren't going to stop them. So we need to come together as like a unified force of global diabetics and kind of stop the killing, really, of people with diabetes. It's murder. They know we need it.
Yeah, I really encourage everyone to go. Yeah, this is the website. Yes, directly to the podcast, right? Broken Vials. Yes, I can't really imagine like myself in this situation. It's just so. It's, I don't know, like some sort of film I watched, or I don't know, some kind of story that and I see and I hear many people don't believe what is going in United States. They are like, really? So so I'm also trying to I'm trying to share information and bring attention to this topic, because I think that's important that we know what's going on beyond our country, beyond our continent, beyond the European Union, and we need to educate ourselves because I've heard it somewhere that if it's not happening to you, then it doesn't mean that it's not happening to someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's no knowing, if one day it could happen in the EU, right? These companies are only getting bigger and more powerful, and they have a lot of money to, change public policy. And it's happening behind closed doors, and we have to hold them accountable.
Yeah, I mean, in Europe, in European Union, it's definitely better than in United States, but it's still very different. It varies a lot between countries. We are now doing this series where we are members of Type 1 EU are sharing their perspective and how are they, buying insulin in their own country. And I can see how different it is. And in some countries, people have less rights, less privileges than in other. And I think insulin. It's essential medicine, and it should be just unified that anyone with diabetes who needs insulin, they should get insulin.
Yeah. I mean, it's like water, right? If we need it, like water to stay alive, people with insulin dependent diabetes. And so, you know, what would people say if a water company just shut off the water or was charging $300 a vial? People would be outraged. But for some reason, people aren't outraged about insulin. And, there's so many people with diabetes in the world. We all come together. We're pretty loud, and we can do it. And, if no one deserves, to die from diabetes and die from not having insulin.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for explaining and bringing a bit closer the insulin in United States topic, because it's complicated, but as I said, we need to educate ourselves and understand what's going on around the world, and not just ignore it, and maybe find ways to help and bring our voices together. So thank you very much for coming to the studio today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to listen to the rest of your conversations.
Thank you. Yeah, and you can watch this recording, and later it will be saved to Facebook and YouTube. And we invite you, yes, to the rest of the interviews. And of course, the topic again will be insulin. And today, thank you, and have a nice day, evening, whatever time it is at your place. So thank you, Craig, and have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.